Hi everyone. This is just a quick video on how do we actually create a cloud drawing. Right? We've got a number of things that we've got to do, and so what we want to do is work through the process. And this is my process. So this is the process I've used in the past. So we open up our drawing program, draw.io or Visio or whatever it is you want to use, and I go into the AWS groups, find the availability zone. So I will drop that kind of about there. Spread it out so we've got most of the width of the page covered, and then I'll drag that down a reasonable distance because we want a fair bit of stuff to go into this thing, so that'll do for the moment. So there's our availability zone. That's our starting point. Now we know we're going to have some both public and private subnets in here, so let's put them in. We pick a subnet and we put that in there, start it down a little bit because we've got some stuff to put in front of it. Bring it out to about here maybe, and then we can redo the name of it and just call this public. There we are. Done. Now if you really want to jazz it up, you can also say let's give it a bit of colour, and we can drop the opacity down to maybe about 60% so you can see things easily. So there's our public subnet. So far so good. We need a private one, so let's repeat the process. Put another one here, stretch it out to there. Private subnet's normally a bit bigger, holds more stuff than a public subnet, so we'll bring that down to about there. I think that'll do that. Let's give it a bit of colour too, and it's at 50% opacity. And this one we'll now label as the private subnet. So there we go. There's our availability zone, 2 subnets in place straight away. Now, the next bit that we need to think about is how do we get access in? So we go down now to our network services area, and we would look for an internet gateway, right? So there's a number of things as you run your mouse over it. You mouse over, you'll see the various different things that you've got. We've got a router. We know we're going to need a router in between the two, so we can drop that in there as we go. A VPN gateway, we'll probably need that when we start to think about how we're going to come into it from internally. So I would grab that VPN gateway and drag that down the bottom here. I'll have to scroll down a little bit further first. Drop this down a bit more and put the VPN gateway just down here outside it. Right, so there's our access for our internal users. We haven't found we've got a customer gateway, which we probably need up the top. And again, we can take that up. Oh, you can do it. So our customer gateway can go there. And there's a few other things that we will need. We need a internet gateway, which isn't there. We need identity and access management. Yes, we'll need that, and we'll put that in place down the bottom because we will need to ensure that when people log in, we can identify who they are. So that can sit in there. We need our network firewall. There we go, AWS Firewall Manager. So that goes up the top. Draw.io can be a little bit funny sometimes. I like to put that probably just about there. So it's in front of the customer gateway. And we can't find the internet gateway, which is always the case when you're looking for it. The minute you walk away from it, you'll find it without a problem. But anyway, there we go to start with. That's a starting point. So we can see, we've got our users coming in through a firewall to a customer gateway. So here we can say we can click on that arrow, and that takes it to there. the customer gateway is going to come down to there. So I can now move that up a little bit so we can see. Services from the public side of the public subnet will actually go through the router to the private subnet, and so we can put that direction there as well, so we can see that gives us our flow. And when we come down here, we see if we click on the VPN gateway, we're going to go up to the identity management, and that then will go to the private subnet. Now, of course, as you see with the arrows, these are kind of a bit moved around all over the place. We just have to adjust sizes and things to suit in order to get a good fit, but we're not going to worry too much about that now. So there we go. That's got a reasonable amount in place. We've now got in an availability zone, we've got public and private subnets that we need to have. We've got a customer gateway, we've got a firewall, we've got a router to connect the two subnets, so information we get in the public subnet can be passed down to the private subnet. We have a VPN gateway for internal company traffic to come into the private subnet, and it's got to go through an AWS identity and access management module, which means we're going to identify and authenticate these people before we let them have access. So now we're at this stage, we've got things pretty well started to be sorted out. You know, we've got a lot of the infrastructure in place. The next step I want to look at is then always, what's the next? What's the public facing stuff? What webs, you know, we say that, you know, in a lot of these things, web services are obviously public facing because the public hits them. So where would we find the web services? You know, so we'll look at things like business productivity, nope. Possibly application integration. You've got a number of different places you can look for them. And in many cases, if you can't find it, you can try some of these are our users. Users can sit up there, and we can bring them down in size and point them to the firewall. But various different devices, desktops, buildings, and so forth. Under general resources, we've got clouds and so forth that we can use. All of these things are available for us too. There's an internet example, but we've bypassed that now by doing it this way, so this works. We've got some servers, tape storage, virtual private cloud, multimedia, but nothing there particularly that's going to work for us for this. So then quite often what we do is head back down to other things where you might have you know, office services. You know, you can use various different servers, hybrid servers or Exchange servers, you know, a virtual web server, you know, and that might be what you say, okay, we're going to put a virtual web server up in here because that's going to be a public facing service, right? So that then becomes accessible to the public. Now, at the back end of that, we will have obviously another server, and you know, usually what you're going to do is you're going to have another server. We've got all sorts of things, SharePoint servers and Skype for Business servers, etc. But we would probably have, you know, another web server down here, which would be, you know, the back end for this particular set of services. So that's a way we can then show that. We can look at that and say, oh no, we do need to put some storage in there because this thing is going to need some storage. So we can go back to the AWS icons and look for storage. And, you know, we don't need an S3 bucket, but an Elastic Block Store would probably work quite well in this sort of instance. So we could put that in there, drop it down in size a bit. So that can be storage for this particular server. Now, it may well be you've got a range of other different servers that you want to put in there as well. And so, quite often you might say, you've got a particular server, such as a SharePoint server, you might want to put in there, or it could be, I saw an Exchange server there at some stage. A SQL server might be another one that you've got to put in, that you're running databases. There could be, where do I see that Exchange server? It's in there somewhere. SharePoint we got. Oh, let's just pick a server and put that in there. And then from that we can say, okay, we've now got a number of series of other servers in there. They may also want to tie in with that Elastic Block Store, or in the case of the SQL server, it may well be that you have a specific database set up for that, in which case you could drop a database icon in there to connect that, and then point that to there, move that to suit, and so forth. And in some cases it may well be that that the SharePoint server, for example, also uses SQL. So we want to move that around to there, perhaps. It's coming the wrong way now. So just get rid of that and do it again. Wants to go through there. So rather than play around with this and spend a bit of time mapping around, this is the sort of process that you can do. Now, if you've got additional services that you're trying to use from AWS, it may well be you want to use an S3 bucket for things. That goes in the availability zone. You can put that in there because that's available right throughout the availability zone. It's not actually in a private or public subnet, it's in the availability zone that's available. You may also want to look at, running something like CloudWatch or key management services. For example, if you want Amazon to manage your keys, private keys, and make sure that they're kept correctly, so that can go in there. The firewalls are there. Secrets Manager, Shell. There's all sorts of different bits you can put in. I thought the CloudWatch was in there. But anyway, these are the sorts of things that you can put in. And this basically lays out what you're doing. The whole idea is to simplify the approach. Look at what you've got to put up there. So the steps when you work through it is create that availability zone first, which we've done here. We've got that in place. Then you create your public and private subnets, right? These two. You put the network parts around them, customer gateways, firewalls, routers, VPN gateways. You actually, at this stage, I bring in a service all the time, the IAM, or Identity and Access Management things, because I am always going to use that to ensure that the connection from a VPN gateway is going through that, to ensure that we know we're identifying the people coming in. Right? So then we start looking at the public services. What are the public services that go in here? And at this stage, we've just said it's a very simple one. We've only got web services. There may well be more, and they go in there. Then you look at what are the internal services that need to go into the cloud. So we've said here there's a number of things. There's the back end for the web services. That's fair enough. You've got SharePoint because you want to push it out to a load of people. You've got Exchange and a few other things. They need a SQL server in order to run properly. So that's in there along with its database. There may be more services there, and as a result, you look at that. But what you've got to look at is what does the company actually want to put into the cloud, because sometimes they may not want to put all of it there. So think about that step, what goes in there. Then you can start to add the storage, as we did for the Amazon Block Store, and then we also put some S3 storage in there because we knew from our from our case study and our context that they were going to be requiring that later on. We added in the key management service, we added in CloudFront, and so forth. So this is the process of gradually building this up, so that we don't try to do it all in one big hit. You do it in a series of steps. So you make sure you've got all those routing connections in place. And then what about any other services that you need from AWS or whoever it's for, Azure or GCP? And you add those into the availability zone, because remember, they don't actually belong to a subnet. They belong in the availability zone and are available throughout that zone. So then if you're going to start to think about high availability or failover or DR, then you might think about, well, do I now have to replicate this? Do I need to put this infrastructure as well in another availability zone and put an elastic load balancer in front of it? So from a diagramming point of view, you could now do a copy and paste and put another copy of the availability zone beside this one, put an elastic load balancer in between it, and then go from there. And that would give you a very simple approach where you've got two completely identical environments that you work with would become a failover, or that work as high availability, or that are used constantly. It's your call, and that's the way in which you approach it. But the diagramming approach is a fairly straightforward approach. This is a very simple demonstration to give you an idea how to put it together. It's a high-level diagram at this stage. When you're first starting off, it's always pretty high level. You're not trying to get all the detail in. You're trying to get enough information in there to show the clients what's happening and what is the overall plan. Then you can start getting into the fully detailed diagram with all the whistles and bells. But first stage, keep it nice and simple. And if you keep it simple, it becomes easier for people to understand. Okay? Of course, it's one of those things that you're going to have to talk to as well. So you can't just, rely on the diagram to do all the work for you. You're going to have to work and talk to that diagram and explain it to people, particularly to, the business people who may never have seen any type of network diagram or may not understand what it all means. And so think about how you explain that, because that's also an integral part of this. I hope you got some value out of this. It's a fairly straightforward exercise. It can be a lot of fun, but take your time at it. Don't push, don't stress. It's a fairly straightforward job. Enjoy, and if you've got any questions, give me a yell.